My cousins also went to the same school. Valentina was the same age as my sister. They were 2 steps above me. My other cousin, Nicole, was a year older than me. They lived just a few meters away from us and we got on really well. Of course, they were always there with us. The time soon came when my sister and Valentina finished elementary school and left. I thought that was a shame, but somehow I was happy to no longer be in their care. I didn't envy them because they now had to go to school 3 or 4 villages away. That was unfamiliar to me and too far away from home. I was glad to still have my best friends and one of my cousins. We continued to enjoy the carefree time. Another exciting story was when a boy stabbed himself in the hand with a knife while doing handicrafts. He bled like crazy. The blood sprayed everywhere and when he saw it he fainted. It was like a movie. He woke up, looked at his hand and then he was gone again. The caring teachers carried him out and laid him on a mat until someone got a car and drove him to the hospital. We were all happy when we were told that he was fine, his hand needed stitches but that he would recover quickly. There are no other exciting stories from elementary school. But as it so happens, this time also came to an end quickly. Back then, you had to take an entrance exam or a placement test. This then determined which school you would go. There was secondary school, district school and a gymnasium school. I didn't pass the entrance exam for gymnasium school. The tasks were just too difficult and I still to this day remember how I just stared out of the window while time ran out. In the end, I went to the district school. This was 1 level below the gymnasium, but better than secondary school. Even then you knew that if you went to secondary school you wouldn't be able to work in an office, only children from the district school could do that and that was my dream. I never knew exactly what I wanted to be, but I knew that I wanted to work in an office. I was really happy because my sister was also at this school. This was a big advantage as I could ask her what it was like there and I could get an idea of what it would be like. What worried me the most was leaving my best friends behind. They were a year younger and so I was on my own from then on. When I talked to my cousins about secondary school, all I heard were horror stories from that school. The kids were wild and ruthless. They made fun of them and excluded them. They could hardly wait to finish that school. My sister, on the other hand, had nothing but great things to say about school and how many new and cool friends she had. I have never been so happy about the results of an exam. The summer vacation flew by and the time had come. The school bus would no longer pick me up, I now had to get on the bus and travel 3 or 4 villages away. At first there were still familiar faces on the bus, but the further we went, the more strange children got on. There were so many children. In the first village 5 got on, then 10 and at some point the bus was full. My heart was pounding. I was so excited. We arrived at the village square where there were several buses full of children from all the nearby villages. They all got off the buses and swarmed off in all directions, because not everyone went to the same school. I was so glad that my sister was there, because I could walk to school with her and her friends. And she even showed me which classroom to go to. The situation was very different there because I was in a class with no one from my village. There were so many children in the district school that there had to make additional grading systems. Depending on how many points you scored in the test, you were placed in Class A or B. Those who scored below a certain number of points went into Class B and those who scored above the number of points went into Class A. I was placed in Class A. I entered the classroom and saw only unfamiliar faces. The worst thing I saw was that some of the children knew each other. They had already formed groups. I sat down in the next best available seat, but in the front row. I just let it sink in, because I wasn't very extroverted. I didn't seek out interaction and talk to the others. I just waited for the lesson to start. When the teacher entered the room, everyone was allowed to introduce themselves. Everyone had to say where they were from and what their expectations were. I came from a small village hidden in the forest. We had 300 residents. I already knew from my cousins that the other children didn't think that was so cool. They were also from villages, but the residents weren't just involved in farming. If you came from this village, you were immediately asked if your parents were farmers, and if the answer was yes, you were more or less rejected and laughed at. And I mean, what kind of expectations can you have at that age? That you'll make lots of new friends and finish school successfully. During the break, I saw the children from the same village and my sister again. My sister had her own friends and I was allowed to go to her, but I didn't want to disturb her or be the annoying little sister who had to be tagged along everywhere. My sister already knew that far too well from home. Whenever she wanted to do something, the poor thing had to drag me along. I also knew that I had to go my own way now. One thing led to another and I made new friends and connections. I was never a pack animal. I chose people who I felt suited me. That's how I met Jasmine. From then on, she was my only and favorite friend. We were both a bit quieter and were enjoying high school. However, school itself became very demanding. There were so many subjects that I hadn't known before: biology, chemistry, French, geometry and much more. I actually did very well in all the subjects. There was only one disgraceful subject: damn French. I was and still am so bad at this language. I can't even form a sentence correctly, and I don't even want to start talking about writing. Whenever French lessons started, we had to read from a book. One sentence each. I was so bad that the teacher occasionally skipped over me to save me from laughter and humiliation. Terrible. It wasn't an easy time. You had to study a lot and you didn't have as much free time. Definitely not a carefree time. Something had definitely changed. It seemed to me that the teachers were also very frustrated. They didn't have much patience. If you got rowdy with the teacher or disrupted the lesson, the teacher would hit you with a book. Not that this was allowed in those days, but I can't imagine that you could get away with something like that today. The other children were also much nastier than I knew. The older children bullied and harassed the younger ones. It was mostly about pointless things. I mostly thought the older girls were jealous and wanted to make life difficult for the younger ones. Jasmine and I both had long brown hair, brown eyes, reddish lips and were very slim builds. My mother always said we looked like two dolls. Jasmine had the prettiest hair, though, I had to admit, and the other girls made it their goal to knock her down. They came up to her at break time and asked her with a laugh, "Are you wearing a wig? Your hair looks really funny." She used to cry because it stressed her out so much and it drove me to the edge. I was so angry because I knew it was such nonsense and they were just jealous of this beautiful doll face with the most beautiful hair I've ever seen. How can something like that happen? I kept telling her, "You can't listen to them. You have beautiful hair and what they are doing here is a complete joke." It was so unnecessary and malicious, I could never and will never understand it. And please don't think I've been sugarcoated. I had to listen to insults too. I know one of the older girls came up to me and said, "Excuse me, can I ask you something?" And I, in my sheer naivety, just said, "Yes, of course, just ask." She then said, "Don't you have any nicer clothes?" She then ran laughing across the playground to her colleagues and they just kept whispering and laughing even more. I was also sad and a bit ashamed. Because I never had the latest clothes, but I knew even then that my parents had always tried to make everything possible for us. The clothes weren't new and maybe I had inherited them from the daughters of my mother's colleagues, but they were nice clothes. My mother would never allowed us to leave the house underdressed or unkempt. Although I felt ashamed, I knew even then that this comment was pointless. For this reason, Jasmine and I always stuck to each other. The boys at school were also much nicer and more welcoming and we formed a small community. Children from the same class spent more time together and were among themselves. Sure, we looked up to the older students, but after everything I saw here, I didn't. To be honest, the daily vulgarities, the nasty remarks were just not my world and I knew one day I'd go to the city and never see them again. I knew these people were the kind of people who never leave the village and their community.